In this video, we're going to take a look at a new beta feature in Tokaido called tokTest. The objective of this feature is to automatically provision the Drupal Nightwatch tests that are found inside the latest versions of Drupal core. We've got an environment here that we've created using the toknew command. It's a copy of the Umami demo site that you can see here. So a relatively straightforward installation. What we're going to do now is we're going to run the command tokTest. It's going to go ahead and create a test database, restart Tokaido with the Chrome driver enabled, and then it's going to check for the configuration of the Nightwatch environment inside Drupal. You'll see that the page is failed in the background there. Now, this will fail initially because there are some changes we have to make to the Drupal core code in how it's configured to interact with Nightwatch. Out of the box at the current version, Nightwatch doesn't support testing over HTTP, but Tokaido only supports connections over HTTPS. So the two things are kind of in conflict there. But the tokTest command is going to reconcile that. It's going to tell us what files need to be changed and ask us to change those manually. Either we're going to fix that so that Tokaido will make that change for you automatically in the future, or we'll hopefully be able to submit a patch into Drupal core so that it will support both HTTP and HTTPS testing in Nightwatch. So the first thing this is doing is, well, not the first thing, but one of the things this is doing is a yarn install on the Nightwatch configuration. It would also check if my project has the correct version of PHP unit. Because I've done this with toknew and everything's nice and fresh from a weekly build, there hasn't been any need to do that. So the other thing that's been brought into my project is this Chrome driver container. You'll see from earlier, when I ran tokps, there was no Chrome driver container configured in my environment. But when this is finished, I'll have a Chrome driver container that's accessible for the Nightwatch tests to run from inside the Tokaido environment. Alright, so this is what I was mentioning before, where we're going to find that there are two commands here, or two files I should say, that need to be changed just subtly in order to work over SSL. The first is this nightwatch.conf.js file. This file passes the configuration to Chrome driver, and by default that doesn't accept insecure SSL certificates, but the internal proxy container for Tokaido listens on an insecure SSL certificate. And I'll show you that just quickly. If I show you tokports HA proxy, I get the local side port number for HA proxy. I can actually just run, I can also just run tok open HA proxy, and that'll open my browser with that port. You'll see that this is an invalid or non-trusted SSL certificate. This works because it uses a Tokaido proxy server for all of my Tokaido projects that has an SSL certificate that's automatically added to the keychain on Mac OS, which you can also set if you're on Linux manually. This doesn't use that certificate inside of the Tokaido environment itself, so it comes up as an insecure certificate. So we'll make that change in this file. And so that was, we just need to search for desired capabilities. So this block here is where we want to add the string for, I have forgotten what we need to call that. Accept insecure certs true. So we'll go back here. Desired capabilities. Let's have some numbering. And accept insecure certs true. So that's the only change we have to make for this nightwatch.conf.js file. Again, just to point out, this is part of core. We're not changing Drupal core, which we really should never do. But when we run a composer install on another machine, say a teammate downloads this repo and wants to run tokTest, they're going to have to make that change as well, because this core, Drupal core, comes from Composer. And at the same time, if we upgrade Drupal core, we'll need to make this change again. The next file we need to change is this Drupal user is logged in test. So this is one of the inbuilt tests that Nightwatch runs. And it just provides a capability for us to run commands and validate commands against the Drupal installation. So this usually uses a session variable starting with SESS. Over SSL, that becomes SSESS, I believe. And that's why we need to make that little configuration change there. With those two files changed, we can run toc test again, which is going to go through that process, and it should be able to recognize that those files are configured, and then it will run the tests. So I'll move this video forward to the point where that's happening. It'll take a couple of minutes. All right, so you can see now that these tests are running. By default, there's 3 tests that come in Drupal core. We can expand that. I'm not really going to cover how to write Nightwatch tests for Drupal core in this video, as that's a very broad topic and a little bit difficult for us to capture in that scope. But you can see here, all this is really running is this yarn test Nightwatch command. It does that from the core directory, so relative to my doc root here, or sorry, to my repository root here, I am in /web/core. And then run yarn test Nightwatch, and that runs the inbuilt Nightwatch test. But those tests will also search most of my repository, aside from things like public files and node modules, for any other Nightwatch tests that are configured. So you can run the inbuilt tests, and you can also create your own tests, say in /tests, that you can then run. Each of these 3 tests takes about a minute to a minute and a half to complete. And that's mostly because each of them runs a site install. They're running against the tests database that's been created by Tokaido directly. We saw it create that just a little bit earlier in the beginning of the process, creating a new test database. So running toc test on an existing project won't delete your copy of your database that you've got there, which is under a different name. All right, so you can see now that our first test has failed. I did fast forward that video a little bit, that recording, to just keep this nice and short, but that did take a little while. And you can see that the expected content didn't come back with what we were expecting, and that's because the test page that it's looking for isn't configured to match the Umami demo site that we've installed. So that's why that particular test is failing. And we'll move forward in a second to the next test. All right, so you can see that the next test has passed. This is the login test, so it's creating a user as admin and verifying that it can log in as that user and access a page. So that test works, which is fantastic. And as you can see, it takes a little while to run each of these tests, and it's going to move on to run the next test, which from memory is going to fail, and again because the content doesn't quite match what the test is expecting. So as you can see, the toc test command is able to help you configure Nightwatch and configure your Tokaido environment to provide Chrome driver and so on, but there's still a fair bit of work that we need to do here to turn this into an out-of-the-box full test suite that you can work with, not least of all because the built-in tests in Drupal don't pass in all situations. So what I'd like to ask is if you want a feature like this in your Tokaido environment, maybe you want it with Behat or Test Cafe, or maybe you like Nightwatch and you want us to keep that. We really do want to develop this functionality over the next couple of releases to something really mature and really powerful. So we'd invite you to submit your feedback to us either by running the toc survey command, and you can type your feedback directly in there, or by opening an issue on GitHub, or by talking to us in the Tokaido channel in the official Drupal Slack. I'll end the video here, even though my tests are still running, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for checking out Tokaido and any feedback that you can share with us. Thank you.